It wasn't the sound of her purse hitting the floor that caught my attention. It was what came after, the soft rattle, like a pill bottle dancing on tile. I looked down. A slim white box had slid out from under the flap and landed perfectly upright against the baseboard. Plan B, not expired, still sealed, like it had just been bought and barely handled. "Marion," I said, my voice slower than usual, "you dropped something." She turned from the kitchen sink, drying her hands with that same blue dish towel she always used. For a second, nothing changed in her face. Then, too quickly, she walked over, snatched it up, and said, "Oh, it's old. Susan gave it to me, like months ago, for her daughter or something. I forgot it was in there." No twitch, no flushed cheeks, no stammering, just a flat wall of words, practiced and polished. 16 years of marriage, and I could count on one hand the times Marion had ever truly lied to me. At least, I thought I could. But this was too smooth, too ready. That's the kind of answer you only rehearse if you expect to be caught. I didn't say anything else, just nodded, then turned back to the groceries. But my hands were clumsy. I put the milk in the pantry, left the bread on the counter, still sealed. The routine broke in my head like a snapped belt. Because here's the thing, Marion was meticulous. She never dropped things, never left her bag unzipped, never came home with her hair out of place or her phone below 80% battery. She was also never late. Not once in 16 years. If she said she'd be home at 6, you could set your watch to the lock clicking at 5:58. She didn't hide her phone. She didn't stay out. She didn't smell like anything unfamiliar. She smiled. She cooked. She folded the laundry into perfect rectangles, and she kissed my cheek on the way to bed like a well-oiled machine. That box broke something. Not the marriage, not yet, but the logic I had built around it. Because if there was no intimacy, no possibility of pregnancy, then what the hell did she need Plan B for? You know what's funny? I didn't even feel angry at first. I felt dumb, like the guy who leaves his car unlocked for 10 years and finally gets robbed. My entire understanding of our life was suddenly up for renegotiation. She had given me no reason to doubt her. That's what made it worse. If you're listening to this and you're over 60, hell, even over 50, you know what I mean when I say that suspicion doesn't come easy after decades of loyalty. It's like trying to walk backward after years of marching straight. But I did start walking backward. I stopped thinking about how long we'd been married. I started thinking about patterns, her routines, her timing, her excuses, and most of all, her face when she picked up that box, the way her eyes didn't widen, the way her voice didn't rise or falter. She was too calm. So I didn't ask again. I didn't accuse. I didn't even bring it up that night when we sat on the couch and watched reruns like nothing had happened. She laughed at a joke on TV. I laughed too. But inside something started turning, slow, mechanical, methodical. I was a mechanical engineer for 42 years. I don't yell. I don't guess. I diagnose. And now, for the first time in my life, I was going to diagnose my marriage. If you've made it this far, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe. I know over 90% of you listening right now aren't, but it motivates the team more than you know. And this story, it's about to go places you won't see coming. I started small. I made a mental note. Day 1, incident with purse. Excuse, friend gave her the pill. Behavior, calm, no stuttering. Didn't ask follow-up. Risk, high. I started watching, quietly, patiently. And what I saw next, well, let's just say it made that little white box look like the most innocent part of her story. The next morning, Marion poured my coffee with a smile and said, "Gina at work's having a meltdown. Some kind of divorce drama. I might need to cover for her tomorrow." She didn't look up from her mug as she said it, and it slid out of her mouth like lint off a sweater. Unremarkable. Unprovable. I nodded and reached for the toast. There was no Gina. Or if there was, she hadn't been mentioned once in all the years Marion had been at that office. But maybe she was new, maybe she was real, maybe I was being paranoid. That's what she would have said, right? That I was being paranoid, that I was letting the Plan B thing mess with my head, that I'd been distant for a while, or working too much, even though I'd been retired for 4 years. Still, I didn't push. Instead, I wrote it down. Day 2 mentioned Gina, work drama, no follow-up. Tone, flat. Then I tucked the pocket notebook into the back of the kitchen drawer under the warranty manuals. The following day, she casually announced, "I'm thinking of volunteering again, that youth outreach thing. Remember I told you?" No, she hadn't. She said it while watering the plants like it was something we'd talked about 100 times. "I might be gone this weekend if they need help," she added. I said, "Good for you," and even managed to smile. But that night, I went back to my drawer. Day 3, volunteer story. Invented memory. Marked shift in tone, uses familiarity to avoid questions. By Sunday, she said she had brunch with the girls at a place downtown. I nodded, said, "Have fun," then waited 15 minutes and got in the car. I didn't tail her close, just enough to keep her taillights within reach. She didn't go downtown. She drove past 3 brunch spots, turned off the highway, and headed into a town we'd only ever visited once to look at antique clocks. I stayed 2 cars behind and watched her park in front of a Walgreens. She didn't go inside. She sat in the car, engine off, window cracked. For 20 minutes, she didn't move, didn't touch her phone, just stared straight ahead like she was waiting for something or someone. Then she started the engine and drove back home. No bag, no receipt, no explanation. That night, over meatloaf and asparagus, she laughed at a joke from the TV, something dumb about a talking dog. She even reached over and touched my arm. I played along, matching her rhythm. But I wasn't in the room anymore. My mind was on that empty parking spot next to hers. Who didn't show up? Or worse, who had already left? Later, when she went to bed early because the heat gave her a headache, I sat down at the shared computer. We'd never had secrets on it. Our passwords were still the same. Hers was the dog's name with a number tacked on. Simple. She'd left a dozen tabs open, recipes mostly, a yoga studio ad, but in her recent history, there was a search string that stopped me cold: how to delay ovulation naturally. Best supplements to regulate hormone cycles after 40. Do Plan B pills expire if unopened? She wasn't planning to avoid intimacy. She was preparing for it, and not with me. I copied the search terms down in the notebook, added a red underline. I should have felt heartbroken. I should have felt betrayed. But what I felt, what slowly began building inside me, was something else. Excitement, not because I wanted this. God, no. But because I now understood the rules of the game. She thought she was playing chess with a man still learning the names of the pieces, but I'd built machines that ran tighter than her alibis. I'd tested systems with fewer moving parts than her lies. And now, I was watching her system fall apart in real time. The next morning, she kissed my cheek on the way out. Same pressure, same angle, routine, practiced. But this time, I didn't smile. I just said, "Be safe." Because next Sunday, I wouldn't just follow her. I'd prepare. And this time, I wouldn't leave empty-handed. The plan was simple. Harmless on the surface. I waited until Marion left for her team check-in at work, which, according to her, had become a weekly requirement now that corporate was cracking down on performance reviews. It was the first time she mentioned anything remotely stressful about her job in months. So I picked up the phone and called Susan. Susan was her oldest friend. Not just wine night close, she was the maid of honor at our wedding, the godmother to our non-existent kids, the one person Marion would have turned to if something real was going on. "Susan," I said, voice light, "I've been thinking of doing something nice for Marion's birthday next month. You know, surprise party, that kind of thing. But I didn't want to interrupt her work stuff. Sounds like she's been swamped lately." Silence. Then a pause, too long for casual. "Swamped?" she repeated cautiously. "Yeah, she said they've been piling it on lately, that she's barely home before 7. Susan chuckled awkwardly. "That's, odd. They actually cut her hours last quarter. She's mostly remote now. Said it was a blessing, remember? More time to focus on herself." I didn't remember, because Marion never told me. I said, "Huh, that's news to me. Maybe I misunderstood." Susan's voice shifted, softer, a little suspicious. "Is everything okay, Paul?" I kept it together. Yeah, just planning ahead. Thanks, Susan. Don't mention this to her, all right? I want it to be a surprise." We hung up, and I sat there for a long time, in the quiet, listening to the refrigerator hum. I could have cried, maybe even screamed, but that would have made it about emotion. I didn't want emotion. I wanted data, the hours, the team meetings, the youth programs, now the remote work lie. She was creating a false structure, a phantom schedule. That meant whatever she was doing, it was regular, consistent, predictable. I got up, walked to the hallway closet, and pulled out the old Netgear router we'd replaced a year ago with one that tracked individual connections. Most people forget routers log everything. I logged in, 2 devices showed up, mine of course, my phone and laptop, but the third? Galaxy S20 Alexis and connected daily from 9:45 a.m. to 2:17 p.m. every weekday, like clockwork. I made a note, device ID, Alexis, unregistered. Logs started 3 weeks ago, appears weekdays only. Marion had told me she was heading to the office during those hours, but someone else had been in our house, or she was somewhere else entirely, and this was a device she kept secret. I clicked into the logs. The device had been pulling down large packets of data, video streaming, some cloud access, and something odd, a constant ping to a server based in Toronto. VPN activity? Maybe. Or she was hiding something more technical than just text messages. I wrote it all down. No emotion, just data points. Then I stared at the logs for a while. Alexis. Not a work laptop. Not a name we'd ever spoken aloud in the house. Definitely not a nickname of hers. I sat back, replaying her schedule in my head. Every Monday, she left at 9, came back around 3. Tuesdays were her in-office days, except now I knew there was no office to speak of. Wednesdays, she taught yoga, a new habit she picked up 6 months ago, but somehow had no photos, gear, or stories about her students. And always the same careful choreography. Out the door, smile on her face, calm in her eyes. But it was all performance. Later that night, over dinner, I mentioned Susan. Just lightly. She says hi, I offered. Marion barely reacted. Ah, I miss her. I should text her. I nodded. You should. Maybe fill her in about work. She thought you were still remote. That got her. Just a flicker. Barely a blink too long before the smile returned. I must have forgotten to update her. Forgotten. This woman had memorized every cousin's birthday and never missed a dentist appointment in 16 years. But now she was forgetting major life updates. Sure. I cleaned my plate, kissed her forehead, and went to bed early. But I didn't sleep. I stayed up, replaying every lie she'd built like scaffolding around a secret she thought I'd never question. What she didn't realize was that I wasn't tearing it down. I was climbing it. And I was almost at the top. Saturday came, dressed in calm like it always did. Marion made French toast for breakfast, cut into triangles, just how I liked it. We watched part of a cooking show, and she pointed out a new casserole recipe she wanted to try. Next week, her voice didn't tremble. Her eyes didn't shift. If anything, she was more relaxed than usual. Peaceful, even. At 6:30 p.m., she changed into a powder blue blouse and gray slacks. Not overdressed, not flashy, just safe, unremarkable. I might be back late, she said, brushing her hair in the hallway mirror. The church fundraiser's running long this year. I'll text if I'm later than 10. I stood in the doorway with my hands in my pockets. Need cash? She smiled. Already gave online. I nodded. Be safe. The door clicked shut at exactly 6:48 p.m. I counted to 90 before grabbing my keys. She didn't notice me pull out behind her 2 streets down. I stayed 3 cars back, letting an SUV slip between us as she merged onto the main road. She didn't head toward the church. In fact, she took the opposite turn, northwest into one of the older suburbs outside the city, where the houses were a little too close together and the porches were lit with flickering bug zappers instead of fairy lights. She drove without hesitation, no rerouting, no wrong turns. She'd been here before. At 7:12, she slowed near a cul-de-sac, pulled into the driveway of a modest brick home with no cars out front. One porch light flickered above the door, no signage, no fundraiser banner, just quiet. I parked 2 blocks over and walked the neighborhood on foot, slowly. I counted 14 houses total. 4 had visible cameras. 1, mounted above a garage with a blinking red LED, pointed directly toward the house Marion had entered. I made a mental note, walked back to my car, waited. An hour passed, no movement. I didn't get out, didn't knock. This wasn't the time to confront. This was the time to confirm. By the time I got home, Marion had texted, still going, might be late, love you. I stared at the message, the period at the end of love you. That wasn't her. She never punctuated that phrase. I downloaded a neighborhood security sharing app, anonymous requests allowed. I filled in the time window, added a polite message about concerns over unusual activity. At 4:06 a.m., my phone vibrated. Footage available for viewing. I opened the link and hit play. The timestamp read 7:13 p.m. Marion walked up the path, purse over her shoulder, calm as ever. She rang the doorbell. 7 seconds passed. A man opened the door. Tank top, bare arms, mid-40s, balding, familiar stance, the kind of confidence that didn't need permission. He leaned forward, not in a hurry, not bashful, and kissed her forehead like he'd done it before. She smiled, stepped inside, the door closed. The footage ended. I sat back in my chair and let the silence eat the room. I wasn't shocked, not anymore. The evidence didn't hurt. It clarified, like removing a fogged lens. There was no fundraiser, no youth outreach, no Gina, no work from home. There was only Marion, and this house, and a man whose face I now knew. Certainty isn't always violent. Sometimes it's just stillness. I didn't tell her what I knew, not yet. Instead, I copied the footage, burned it to a flash drive, added it to the growing envelope in my study. Then I got up, made coffee, and waited for her to come home. At 7:01 a.m., she walked through the door with a tired smile and a paper bag of church cookies she'd grabbed before leaving. I smiled back. "You must have been the hit of the night." She grinned. "You have no idea." "Oh, but I did, and I was just getting started." It started as a passing comment over dinner, one of those half-swallowed bits of conversation designed to sound routine. "Had a consultation this morning," Marion said, slicing through her grilled chicken with unnecessary precision. "Dr. Hammond just wanted to get some baseline labs run." I looked up from my plate. "Hammond?" She nodded, didn't even blink. "New guy, private practice near the park. Kara recommended him." Kara, another name that floated in and out of Marion's fabricated social orbit like a ghost. Just real enough to sound plausible, just distant enough to never be questioned. I added it to my mental file. "Everything okay?" I asked, careful to sound casual. "Yep, routine stuff," she said, a little too quickly. "You know, just hormones, fatigue, getting older. Figured it couldn't hurt." I nodded, didn't push, didn't even touch my notepad that night. I didn't need to. I remembered every word. The next morning, while Marion was at yoga, I sat at my desk and called every clinic within 30 miles. General practice, women's health, hormone specialists, boutique wellness spas. No Dr. Hammond, no one had even heard the name. I saved the insurance portal for last. Marion and I shared one family account through our provider. She'd never changed the password, never needed to, because she never thought I'd be the one checking. No claims in the past 60 days, not for blood work, not for consultations, not for anything remotely resembling a visit to a doctor. But then I opened the card transactions tied to our health savings account. There it was, a 108er charge from Solara Vitality and Wellness posted 2 days ago. No CPT code, no diagnostic reference. Just a payment marked private client intake. I opened another tab, looked up Solara, boutique health spa, cash preferred, no affiliation with major hospitals. It was the kind of place that advertised discreet service and custom wellness mapping. It was located in a converted Victorian house near the city's historic district, the kind of place that smelled like lavender and shame. I drove there the next morning. Inside, the lobby was quiet. Cream walls, brushed gold lettering on the windows, soft classical music piping from invisible speakers. The woman at the counter smiled with the emptiness of someone used to lying politely. "Hi," I said. "I'm here to pick up labs for my wife, Marion Lowell." She tilted her head. "I'll need to see her ID or a signed release form." I made a show of checking my pockets. "Shoot, she just asked me to swing by. Said she filled something out already." "No problem," she replied, still smiling. "But without her ID or consent, we can't release anything. HIPAA, you know." "Course." I nodded, thanked her, and stepped outside. I didn't leave. I parked down the street, angled just enough to see the front door, waited. 30 minutes passed, then 40, and at 11:12 a.m., Marion pulled up in her car. She stepped out, not rushed, not nervous. Her hair was down, sunglasses perched casually on her head. She wore a fitted jacket and that same powder blue blouse from the fundraiser night. She looked pleased, confident. She walked inside without hesitation. No appointment reminder on the fridge, no calendar note, no mention at all. I sat there watching the front door, heart steady, not racing, not clenched, just steady. She stayed inside for 40 minutes. When she exited, she looked down at her phone, typed something, and walked back to her car with a soft smile, like someone who just got good news or good results. She drove away. I waited until she was gone before pulling back out onto the road. Back home, I added it to the file. Photos, the lab name, the timestamps, the charge, her lie, and the new truth. There was no Dr. Hammond. I was done guessing. I was done wondering. Now I was confirming. She thought she was in control, that her lies were stitched tightly enough to pass for fabric, but the seams were already unraveling, and soon she'd trip over her own threads. It was almost too perfect, like a script written by someone with a sick sense of irony. Marion had gone upstairs to shower, humming to herself, a little too loud, a little too cheerful, like someone trying to drown out the thoughts in their own head. Her phone, for once, wasn't glued to her. It sat face up on the kitchen counter, plugged into the wall like it belonged there. That alone was unusual. Marion never left her phone out. Never. Not since 2020, at least, when she started locking it even during yoga. But today it lay there, unlocked like bait. Then it buzzed, once. A quick vibration, then silence. I didn't touch it immediately. I sat with my coffee and waited to see if she came back down. She didn't. So I stood, walked to the counter, and looked at the screen. Missed call, no name, just a number, and a voicemail notification. I hesitated. I'd never checked her messages before, not even when things first started feeling off. But this wasn't paranoia anymore. This wasn't some vague suspicion. This was a man standing at the edge of the final piece. And once you see the corner of the puzzle, you finish it. I tapped the voicemail. The voice was male, confident, familiar in the way that only comes from intimacy. Hey, next time, don't wait. Just take it when you need it. I've got more. Don't make this weird, okay? You know I don't care. Just ask. End of message. I played it again, slower this time. The tone wasn't flirtatious. It wasn't romantic. It was transactional. Like he was used to her hesitating, used to coaxing her into just taking it. It wasn't just infidelity anymore. There was an exchange happening, something physical, maybe pills, maybe money, maybe something else entirely. I deleted the voicemail, not because I wanted to protect her, because I wanted her to think nothing had changed. She came downstairs 20 minutes later, toweling her hair, smiling like a teenager. She made breakfast from scratch, eggs, toast, even bacon, which she usually avoided. "Morning," she said with a sing-song edge. I gave her the same look I always had. "Morning. You're in a good mood." She giggled. "Just felt like doing something nice. You've been working hard in the garden." Figured I'd return the favor. I made a joke about needing hazard pay for the rose bushes, and she laughed. Too loud, too hard. She was performing again, performing for the man she thought didn't know. Later, when she sat beside me on the couch, she curled into my side like we were dating again, showed me a meme on her phone, laughed at a cooking video, laid her head on my shoulder like it hadn't been months since she'd touched me unprompted. And I played along, because I wasn't ready to move yet. Not yet. I needed to know what she'd taken, what he'd given her. I needed to connect that voicemail to the clinic, to the lies, to the Plan B box, to the phantom schedules, and the fabricated names. Because once I moved, there would be no turning back. So I held her, kissed her forehead, and said, "This is nice." And she smiled like she'd won something. But the truth? The second I heard that voicemail, the game ended. Now I was just letting her play out the final round. The investigator's office was smaller than I expected. No frosted glass door or chain-smoking secretary like in the movies. Just a converted back room in a strip mall, wedged between a dry cleaner and a vape shop. The kind of place you'd overlook 100 times before walking in with a purpose you never wanted. But I walked in with purpose. The PI's name was Leary, former county detective turned freelancer. Gray around the temples, quiet eyes, the kind of man who didn't ask why, just what do you want to know? I slid the slip of paper across the table, the phone number from the voicemail, nothing else. "Can you trace it?" I asked. Leary didn't even look at it, just nodded. "Might be prepaid, might take a few days, but yeah, I can find who's holding it." I leaned back in the chair. "Don't just get me the name. I want everything." He tilted his head. "Everything?" "Everything," I repeated. "Where he lives, who he is, how long they've been connected, If he's done this before, I don't care how long it takes. He gave a low grunt of understanding. Might cost you more. Good. That means it's worth something. He scribbled a few notes and said he'd call when the trail warmed up. I left the office with a folder of forms to sign and the kind of silence you don't get from shock. But strategy. I didn't tell Marion about my day. That evening, she made chicken soup and asked if I wanted to maybe go out this weekend. I told her I'd think about it, smiled, kissed her forehead, played my role. 6 days later, Leary called. Got a hit, he said. It's a burner, like we thought. Bought in cash 3 towns over. Registered under a fake name, but the store had surveillance. I gripped the phone tighter. And? He exhaled. It's a man, mid-40s. Drove a red Honda Civic, out-of-state plates. We ran the plates, then cross-checked the footage with university records. I stopped breathing. He used to be an adjunct professor at your wife's old university, taught social behavior and ethics. Left about 8 years ago. Married, still is, wife's a real estate agent. My mouth was dry. Does Marion know him? Leary didn't pause. Yeah, she was in 2 of his classes, fall and spring semester. I pulled the yearbook photos and faculty pages from archive.org, found an old photo of him at a student banquet. Guess who's next to him in the group shot? I didn't respond. She is, smiling. Same hair, same eyes. You can tell she liked him even back then. I sat down slowly, the phone still against my ear. This wasn't new, I said aloud, more to myself than to him. Nope, Leary said. This was an old thread she tied back together. My guess? They reconnected sometime this year. Maybe a class reunion, maybe she found him online. But it wasn't random. There it was. The final piece. I hadn't been ready to admit this wasn't just betrayal. It was history, not a mistake, a decision, a full circle act wrapped in the nostalgia of stolen youth and unfinished fantasy. I asked Leary to send the full report, photos, timelines, employment records, marriage certificates, everything. He emailed it within the hour. I printed the whole thing, 72 pages, bound it with a black clip and slid it into the same envelope that held the Plan B photo, the router logs, the pharmacy footage, the voicemail transcript, and now a face. His face. I stared at it for a long time. He looked smug, the kind of man who never stopped playing the role of charismatic academic, even after the campus lights dimmed. He had the eyes of someone who thrived on power, but kept his hands just clean enough to keep teaching. He wasn't young anymore, but the kind of man who thought his age gave him charm instead of expiration. And Marion, she'd always said college had changed her life. She just never told me who helped rewrite the chapters. That night, she fell asleep on the couch, watching one of those shows where people renovate houses they'll never live in. I covered her with a blanket, smiled down at her. She didn't know yet, but soon she'd learn that some blueprints, especially that the ones drawn in secret, were made to collapse. The lies were no longer isolated. They were a system now, one that breathed quietly under our roof like mold behind drywall. So I did what any good engineer would do. I stopped reacting, and I started auditing. I went back through our joint accounts. Not the obvious ones. She was too smart to leave fingerprints on the checking account. But the grocery card, that was her domain. It had been hers since 2009. She liked the points. Said they helped with coupons. It took less than an hour to see the pattern. Every Friday for the past 11 weeks, a withdrawal. Always between $80 and $200. Never a cent more. Always at the same ATM near the east end of town. The receipt locations were vague. ATM cash dispense. The kind of line item no one questions unless they're looking. I looked. The dates lined up too, right before her volunteer weekends or off-site workshops. And yet, every Sunday, the fridge looked the same. Milk, bread, maybe half a bag of arugula. Groceries. My ass, I filed for access to the ATM surveillance under my name, citing fraudulent withdrawals. A little trick I'd learned from a friend in the credit union industry. The footage was delivered in a secure drive 3 days later, no questions asked. I watched it in my garage, laptop balanced on my old workbench, the smell of cut pine and engine oil surrounding me like armor. There she was, Marion, my wife, neatly dressed, hair pinned up, sunglasses on. Friday morning, 9:37 a.m. She withdrew $160, counted it, folded it carefully, and tucked it into her bag. Then she didn't leave. She walked across the lot, stood near the side entrance of the Petco. A man approached, red Civic, window rolled down. It was him, the same one from the security footage at the suburban house. The same forehead kiss, the same tank top, now paired with aviators and a smug posture that made my hands curl into fists. Marion leaned in through the window, spoke for a moment, smiled, handed him something. The money, probably. Then she turned, checked her phone, and walked away. Like it was nothing, like this was normal. The clip ended. I watched it twice more. Slow motion. Analyzed posture, distance, gesture. She never touched him, but she didn't have to. This was a transaction, routine, coordinated. I saved the clip to a new folder on my desktop, named it Withdrawals. I added it to the growing archive. Plan B photo, router logs, wellness lab timestamp, voicemail transcript, PI report with yearbook photo, and now, video evidence of cash exchanges. I pulled a USB stick from my desk drawer, wiped it clean, and copied everything onto it. When the progress bar hit 100%, I unplugged it, labeled it in permanent marker. Truth. No drama. No flair. Just black ink on a plastic body. I wrapped it in a microfiber cloth and placed it inside the hollow space beneath the drawer lining of my filing cabinet. Next to the envelope. Next to the printed PI file. Then I locked the drawer. She came home at 6:12 that night. I grabbed salmon, she said, holding up the grocery bag like a trophy. Felt like doing something different. I nodded. Smells good. She kissed my cheek. Missed you today. I smiled. You too. She made dinner. We watched a movie. She rested her feet on my lap like we were still us, like the last 12 weeks hadn't exposed her entire second life. But I didn't say anything, because this wasn't about the truth anymore. This was about timing. And I wasn't going to waste the weight of this evidence on an argument. I was going to drop it like a trap door, one that couldn't be walked back through. It was a Thursday night when I chose to start ending the story. The house was quiet. Marion had just finished folding towels in the den while humming along to some podcast about mental wellness and midlife. I sat in my recliner, reading, letting the stillness settle thick in the room. The lamp cast a warm glow over the edge of my open book, but I wasn't seeing the words. I was counting. 3 breaths in, hold, 4 seconds out, just like I used to during high-pressure diagnostics in the field. Then I exhaled fast and slumped forward, letting the book fall from my lap to the carpet. Paul, she called. You okay? I didn't answer, just rested my elbows on my knees and pressed my palm to my chest like something was pressing back. She came rushing in. What is it? What's wrong? I looked up slowly. I don't know. Chest, tight, dizzy. I added a cough for good measure. Might be nothing, just feels off. Marion's eyes widened with genuine fear. For the first time in months, her panic wasn't rehearsed. Come on, we're going to urgent care. I waved her off at first, just to sell it, then finally let her grab her purse and guide me out the door like a good, concerned wife. The ride there was quiet, save for the sound of her nervous breaths and the occasional, "You'll be fine. Probably stress. Let's just be safe." She still cared in her way, but not enough. At check-in, I gave the nurse a vague summary of symptoms, and they brought me into a side room for observation. Vitals normal, heart rate steady, but they ran an EKG anyway. I knew the script well enough to keep my story in the gray zone. When the nurse stepped out to get the supervising PA, I turned to Marion. I need my beta blockers, I said, letting just a flicker of urgency into my voice. The ones in the bedroom drawer. Her brow furrowed. Why didn't you bring them? I didn't think this was serious, I murmured. But if my BP spikes, I'd rather not wait. She hesitated. I'll have to drive back and forth. I'll be here, I interrupted. Monitored, just go. I'll feel better knowing they're close. She nodded and kissed my forehead. Back soon. She was gone in 4 minutes flat. As soon as the door closed behind her, I sat up straight, unhooked the EKG leads, slid my shoes back on. Then I opened my coat pocket and pulled out a thick manila envelope marked Private Legal Docs. I walked to the hallway and flagged the attending nurse. Excuse me, I said. Can I ask a favor? She blinked. Sure. I need you to witness a signature. Just yours. No liability, no approval. Just confirmation someone saw me sign this. She looked wary. What kind of document? Separation agreement, I said flatly. I'm not dying, by the way. Just done pretending I'm not. To her credit, she didn't flinch. Just took the folder, reviewed the top sheet, and nodded. Fine, date and sign? I did. Then I handed her a second item from my pocket. One small black USB drive labeled Truth. This, I said, goes to the law office listed here if anything happens to me. Or if this woman, I pointed to Marion's emergency contact line, comes in and tries to dispute any part of what I've signed. She studied me for a second, then nodded again. Got it. I thanked her and returned to the bed, just in time to hear my phone buzz. Marion. Got them. Be there in 10. Perfect. By the time she arrived, I was lying down again, eyes closed, feigning exhaustion. She rushed in with the bottle, apologizing for taking too long. I opened my eyes slowly, smiled faintly. Thanks. We drove home in silence. She thought she had done her duty, checked the box, played the role, but what she didn't know was that the assets had already moved, every joint account, every trust I'd helped her build with my investments, converted to an irrevocable trust in my name. The USB was a time bomb. All it needed now was her signature, and it was only a matter of time, because Marion, despite everything, still thought I was in the dark, still thought I was the man who nodded and smiled and asked for salmon at dinner. She didn't know I'd already ended the show. All that was left now was the final curtain. Saturday morning arrived with its usual deceitful peace. The birds outside chirped like they hadn't heard a damn thing, and the sun spilled across the kitchen tiles like nothing had ever gone wrong. Marion came through the door at 10:14 a.m., carrying a cloth tote with the words, "Serve with grace," stitched across the side. I almost laughed. She looked flushed from the cold, or the performance, or both. Her smile was automatic, maybe even hopeful. Maybe she thought the soup last night had worked, that the volunteer lie had somehow patched over the canyon between us, that her script still played. I sat at the dining room table, arms resting quietly at my sides. In front of me, placed like an offering, was the envelope. Manila. Thick. Unassuming. Hey, she said, shrugging off her coat. Sorry I'm late. One of the kids got sick. We stayed to help the mom. Before you say anything, I said calmly, open that. She froze mid-step. The smile flickered, held, and then fell apart at the edges. Her hands were slower now, cautious, but she obeyed. She sat down and opened the envelope like it might bite her. She pulled out the stack. On top, a photo of her leaning into a red Civic window, her face turned just enough to see the smile. The timestamp in the corner was unmistakable. Next, the footage still of her entering the house in the suburbs, the kiss on the forehead. Then, the voicemail transcript, clean, word for word. Next time, don't wait. Then, a printout of her internet search history, ovulation cycle queries, Plan B expiration, hormone supplements. Then, the ATM withdrawal records, with stills from the bank's footage, her handing him cash. And finally, beneath it all, the separation draft. Her hand trembled as she placed the papers back into the envelope. She didn't look up. For several seconds, the only sound was the ticking of the wall clock. I watched her chest rise and fall like she was trying to reset her body to normal, like she thought if she could just breathe the right way, she could undo it. It wasn't what you think, she said quietly. I nodded. No, it was worse. She blinked, tears already brimming. It was stupid, it was just... She sniffed. I felt invisible, Paul. You stopped looking at me. I let that one sit, let her twist in it. We haven't been us in so long. And he made me feel like I still had a spark, like I mattered to someone. I interrupted. So you gave him cash from our account, lied about work, invented doctors, slipped off to labs like a teenager with a forged note. That's what mattering looks like now. She stood suddenly, the chair legs screeching across the floor. I was gonna end it, I swear. It was just dumb. I didn't plan for it to go this far. No, I said, you planned a lot of things. You just didn't plan on getting caught. She stepped forward, her voice now cracking. Paul, please, we can fix this. We've got history, years. You can't just walk away. I stood too, calmly, collected. I already did. She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. I'm not screaming. I'm not breaking things. You want rage, you won't get it. What you get, what you've earned, is silence and paperwork. But, Paul, I didn't leave the marriage today, Marion. I left the moment your purse hit the floor and that little white box rolled out like a confession. I just took my time finishing the job. Her lips parted like she had one more speech in her, one more excuse, but nothing came. I grabbed my coat off the hook. No theatrics, no slammed door, just the sound of my footsteps and the air behind me closing in around the space I used to fill. And as I reached the sidewalk, the last thing I heard wasn't a scream or sob. It was the silence of a woman who finally realized the worst thing I could do was leave without a sound.